The idea was simple, almost brilliant. I wanted to build a solid, sturdy coffee table for the living room, but I didn't want to spend a fortune on fancy hardwood. You know the kind I'm talking about. Oak, walnut, the stuff that costs more per board than my lunch for a week. So, I had a thought. Why not use the regular construction lumber from the big box store? The stuff they use to build houses. It's strong, it's widely available, and best of all, it's cheap. I imagined myself walking out of the store with a cart full of wood for less than 50 bucks. It seemed like the ultimate woodworking hack. Get the look and feel of a solid wood project without the high price tag. Easy, right? My expectations were sky high. I pictured myself knocking out this project in a single weekend. I'd grab some 2x4s and 2x6s, bring them home, and get straight to cutting. In my mind, wood was wood. Sure, the expensive stuff might look a little prettier, but a straight board is a straight board. I thought the process would be exactly the same as any other project. Cut the pieces to length, drill some pocket holes, and screw it all together. The finished table in my imagination was perfect, with tight joints and a flat, beautiful top. It was going to be my masterpiece of frugality, a testament to the idea that you don't need a big budget to make great things. So, feeling pretty smart, I drove over to the home center on a Saturday morning. I had my cut list in my pocket and a big dose of confidence. The plan was to build a simple, rustic-style table, the kind you see in fancy catalogs for hundreds of dollars. My version, made from basic pine, would have all the charm but none of the cost. I figured I could sand it down real smooth, throw on a nice dark stain and some polyurethane, and no one would ever know it was made from humble construction lumber. I was ready to prove that with a little bit of work, the cheapest wood in the store could be transformed into something amazing. This project was supposed to be my shortcut. I've seen countless videos and plans online showing these amazing builds using basic lumber. They make it look so effortless. The creators in the videos just grab a few boards, make a few cuts, and suddenly, a beautiful piece of furniture appears. I thought I could do the same. This coffee table wasn't just a project, it was going to be a statement. It would prove that good woodworking is about skill, not about how much money you can throw at materials. At least, that's what I told myself as I walked through the automatic doors of the store, ready to find my cheap, perfect lumber. Walking into the lumber aisle of a big box store is an experience. You're hit with that amazing smell of fresh-cut pine. Stacks of 2x4s reach toward the ceiling, all looking pretty much the same. I started my hunt, determined to find the best of the best. I followed all the usual advice. I sighted down the edge of each board, looking for any bows or crooks. I placed them on the flat concrete floor to check for twists. I spent a good 45 minutes digging through a giant pile of wood, like a lumberjack archaeologist. The boards I finally picked seemed perfect. They were straight, they were clean, and they had very few knots. I loaded them onto my cart, feeling victorious. I got the lumber back to my workshop and was excited to get started. My plan was to begin cutting everything to size right away. The boards still looked great sitting on my workbench. They lay flat, they looked straight, and I was ready to go. I measured my first piece for the table leg, marked it carefully with my square, and made the cut. It was a perfect 90-degree cut. I did this for all 4 legs, and then moved on to the pieces for the tabletop. Everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. The pile of cut pieces was growing and my coffee table was starting to take shape, piece by piece. The dream was alive. But then, something strange started to happen. I left the cut pieces sitting on my workbench overnight. When I came back into the shop the next morning, things looked different. A couple of the boards that were perfectly flat the day before now had a slight curve to them, like a banana. One of the leg pieces that had been perfectly square now had a noticeable twist running down its length. It was like the wood had come to life while I was sleeping. It was a baffling and frustrating sight. What happened to my perfect straight boards? They were right here yesterday. This was my first hard lesson. Contractor-grade lumber is often very wet. It's green wood, meaning it hasn't been properly dried for furniture making. When I brought it from the store into my dry workshop, it started to lose that moisture, and as wood dries, it moves. It twists, it cups, it bows. The straight board I bought at the store was only straight because it was full of water. Once I cut into it and let it sit, it started to change shape as it adjusted to the new environment. My perfect boards were a lie, and the wood itself was now revealing the truth. The real trouble began during assembly. I tried to join two boards together to form a corner of the table's apron. The pocket hole joints I drilled were clean, and the screws were ready. But when I brought the two pieces together, there was a huge gap. They just wouldn't sit flush. One board was slightly twisted, so its end wasn't a flat surface anymore. I tried clamping it down as hard as I could, but the wood fought back. It just didn't want to be straight. This happened over and over. Every joint was a struggle. What should have been a simple, strong connection became a frustrating puzzle of gaps and misalignments. The tabletop was an even bigger nightmare. My plan was to join several 2x6 boards side by side to create a wide, solid surface. But when I laid them out, it was a disaster. Some boards were cupped, meaning the edges were higher than the center. Others had a slight bow. When I tried to line them up, it looked like a wavy potato chip. There was no way to get a flat top. If I got one side to line up, the other side would have a massive gap. It was clear that simply screwing these boards together wasn't going to work. The wood was too unstable and too unpredictable. My dream of a smooth, flat tabletop was quickly turning into a bumpy, uneven mess. I started to see flaws everywhere. A leg that looked straight on its own would look crooked as soon as I attached it to the frame. The whole structure just felt wobbly and out of square, no matter how much I measured and remeasured. It felt like I was building with a bunch of bananas instead of lumber. This is the untold truth of using cheap construction wood for furniture. It isn't just about accepting a few more knots. It's about dealing with wood that is actively changing shape as you work with it. It requires a completely different approach, one that I was not prepared for. At this point, I was ready to give up. I thought I had just picked bad boards. Maybe I should have spent even more time at the store searching for those magical, perfectly stable 2x4s. But then I realized the problem wasn't just the boards I picked. The problem was the nature of the wood itself. This lumber was never meant for fine furniture. It was meant to be nailed into a wall and covered with drywall. Its purpose is to be strong, not perfectly stable or flat. My expectations were the real problem. I was treating this cheap pine like it was expensive, kiln-dried maple, and the wood was fighting me every step of the way. I had to stop and completely change my strategy. The first thing I did was learn to be much pickier at the store. But I also changed what I was looking for. Instead of just looking for straightness, I started looking for boards with growth rings that were as vertical as possible on the end grain. This is called quarter sawn or rift sawn, and it's much more stable. I also learned to let the wood rest. After bringing the new boards home, I let them sit in my shop for a full 2 weeks before I even thought about cutting them. This gives the wood time to acclimate to the humidity in my shop and do most of its moving before I start building. When I finally did start cutting, I did it in stages. I would cut my pieces an inch or two longer than I needed, then I'd let them sit for another day or two. This lets any stress in the wood release. Often, a board that was straight before the cut would develop a slight curve after. By cutting them long, I could then make a final clean cut on a more stable piece of wood. It's a much slower process. It requires patience. You can't rush a project with this kind of lumber. You have to work with the wood, not against it. It's less about forcing it into place and more about guiding it. I also had to learn to embrace imperfection. My coffee table was not going to have the perfect, seamless joints of a high-end piece of furniture. And that's okay. I started to see the small gaps and the slight unevenness not as mistakes, but as character. It gave the table a rustic, handmade honesty. I focused on making the structure strong, using glue and screws to create a solid frame, even if it wasn't perfectly square. By letting go of the idea of perfection, I was able to find the joy in the process again. The project became a collaboration between me and the unpredictable nature of the wood. In the end, I finished the coffee table. It's not perfect, the top isn't perfectly flat, and some of the joints have tiny gaps if you look closely. but it's strong, it's functional, and it looks great in our living room. The biggest lesson I learned is that using cheap lumber isn't about being lucky and finding good boards. It's about having knowledge and respecting the material for what it is. You have to understand that this wood will move, and you have to plan for it. If you have patience and adjust your techniques, you absolutely can build amazing, affordable furniture. You just have to let the wood tell you how it wants to be worked.